Namaskar viewers, hello and welcome to Censored TV. I'm Tina Jha, you're watching Perspective. Foreign universities will now be able to set up their campuses in India. The University Grants Commission has unveiled draft regulations for setting up and operation of campuses of foreign higher educational institutions in the country. So foreign institutions have to first register with the UGC. They are required to establish their campuses in India within 2 years and become operational within 45 days of receiving the final approval from the Commission. The initial approval will be valid for a period of 10 years. The foreign universities setting up campuses in the country will have the freedom to devise their own admission process and also decide on the fee structure. However, they cannot offer online or distant learning program. They have to offer only full-time programs in physical mode. Several other measures have also been undertaken by the UGC to safeguard the interests of the students, which we will analyze in detail with eminent experts joining us on the program, besides understanding the larger objective of these rules and regulations. And for this, I'm pleased to welcome three eminent panelists. Professor M. Jagdish Kumar, he is chairman of the University Grants Commission. Professor Kumar, thank you for your time. Welcome to the program. Professor Harsh V. Pant, King's College London. He's also the Vice President, Studies and Foreign Policy, ORF. And Professor Amlindu Mishra, Department of Politics, Philosophy and Religion, Lancaster University, the United Kingdom. Thank you to both of you as well for joining us on the program. Professor Kumar, let me begin the program today with you. You know, internationalization of higher education was envisaged in the new education policy 2020, and following which there was a lot of excitement, but also a lot of apprehension and criticism about how it would actually, become a reality. So as you announced the modalities of this development today, help us and our viewers first understand, and in fact, it would be helpful for us if you give us an overview of the objective behind this development, which will pave a way towards globalization of higher education in India.
Right. Thank you for inviting me to be part of this discussion. As you know, during last 2 years, we have been implementing various components of the national education policy in India. And one of them is the internationalization of our higher education. And towards that, recently in last May 2022, we issued a new regulation permitting the Indian students to do twinning, joint and dual degree programs. Already close to about 49 to 50 universities are in the process of working out these details with the international universities. So that is one way in which our students will have access to high quality international education. The other way, going a step ahead, is the establishment of campuses by foreign higher educational institutions in India. And as you rightly said, national education policy emphasizes on this fact. And in fact, it says that top universities in the world need to be facilitated to operate in India. And it also says that appropriate legislative framework should be there for the entry of these foreign campuses in India. And to realize that goal, we have worked during past few months in designing the draft regulations for facilitating the campuses of foreign higher educational institutions in India. So what we have done today is announce these draft regulations to the public for the feedback from them. And in next 2 weeks, we will collect this feedback and introduce some of that useful feedback in the regulations, get it passed by the Commission.
Right.
And before the end of this month, by about the 28th or 27th, we want to publish it as a Gazette notification so that it becomes the law of the land, and it will encourage the foreign universities to come to India. But let me also add here that once these regulations come into force, UGC will be proactively be working with the ambassadors of the foreign countries who are located in New Delhi, and also our own Indian ambassadors who are located in about 55 countries where the top universities are located. So UGC will proactively work to make sure that in next 6 months, 1 year, we will have a lot of activity taking place in establishing the campuses of the foreign universities in India.
Professor Pant, for a country like ours, wherein a lot of our youngsters are flocking to different countries, I was going through statistics, and the most recent data suggests that about 4.5 lakh students traveled abroad for higher studies in just the last year. Will this policy now help in retention of these students? They now have the option of staying back home and getting degrees from the foreign universities that they actually dream of working in. So in that aspect, Professor Pant, do you see this policy as a game changer?
Well, indeed, Tina, I think this is a very welcome step, and I think a much needed step insofar as the internationalization of higher education being one of the primary motives being articulated in the national education policy. And I think when we look at the higher education system across the world, one of the most important metric to measure the quality is how internationalized the higher education system is. And in that context, to have the best universities around the world, giving them incentives to set up campuses in India is extremely significant. And I think for a country as aspirational as India, it is incumbent on Indian, leadership and decision makers to visualize higher education in terms of the choices that it can offer to some of our best. Because as you point out, a lot of the youngsters, a lot of the aspirational middle classes in India are already vying for global education, and a lot of them cannot make it because of the resource crunch, perhaps, or because of the dilemmas that they face within, in terms of being at a particular level in the socioeconomic ladder. So I think this is certainly a very welcome step. And given that higher education across the world today is being measured in terms of its ability to attract the best talent, in terms of its ability to retain that talent, and in terms of developing that ecosystem, which is so important in shaping higher education system anywhere in the world, this will certainly allow not only foreign universities to come in and explore campuses in India, but also, I think, enhance the quality of education in the country, enhance the competitive spirit in the country in terms of the state education, higher education institutions improving their performance, or trying to improve their performance and competing with the best in the world. So I think there cannot be a better move in terms of the way the global education system is moving and the way the aspirations of Indian education system that have been articulated in the education policy of the country. So I think this is certainly a very welcome move, and if implemented in the right spirit, and if taken forward with the kind of proactiveness that Professor Kumar was highlighting, this can certainly change the way we look at the higher education system in India and visualize and hope for the best for our own students and for our own demographic dividend that we want to tap into.
Of course, that's going to be the most important thing, because, India today is home to the largest number of youth today, Professor Mishra. But how we're going to do that in the times to come is something that I'll come back to you. In the meanwhile, let me get in your point of view on this development, this reform that India is undertaking in the field of higher education. How lucrative do you think is it going to be for the foreign universities wanting to set up campuses in India? So as per the UGC, now they have the freedom to decide on the admission structure, also decide on the fee structure. So how welcoming is that if you look at it from the point of view of foreign institutions?
Thank you, Tina, for that question. It's very, very relevant what you have just asked. And I'll sort of echo both the panelists' sentiment that this is indeed a very positive step forward. But let's not get ahead of ourselves, and let's look at the global environment in terms of overseas campuses in different countries. And this is an initiative that was started by the Americans, who sort of established their campuses first in Egypt, American University of Cairo, then in Beirut. And these days, they have campuses in other places in the Middle East, especially in United Arab Emirates and Qatar. And the problem, of course, that I see here, I don't want to be too skeptical here, but the regulations that we are talking about, these are the institutions who have established primarily areas that focus on humanities and social sciences. And there is very little in terms of natural sciences and medicine and so on and so forth. Now, the question, of course, is, are these foreign institutions that we are trying to aim for going to establish that knowledge exchange that is so much needed in India? That's number one. Or is it just going to be social sciences as well as the humanities? That's number one. Second, we have to look at the requirements that UGC has set up, and that is that you have to have in-person teaching, which is noble, which is exciting. But at the same time, how are these institutions going to bring this particular talent to these third countries? Because I myself was involved in our own overseas campus in the country of Ghana in West Africa, and we realized that not anyone from the Lancaster campus wants to go there. So that is the reason why we had to set up a local talent pool, and the Lancaster University Ghana campus is mostly run by the local talent. Is that something that is going to happen in the case of India? And that is a similar situation that are faced by many other British universities. Nottingham University has its campuses in Malaysia and in China and in the Middle East as well. So this is one thing. And the second one is by 2024, the Indian flow of students to overseas is going to be somewhere around 1.8 million. Now, let's not kid ourselves to the very fact that not all of them are going overseas just because the educational facilities are there. It's also a cultural experience. So if we are going to give someone a British education in India, is that going to be at par with someone studying in England or in America, in Australia, or any English-speaking country? So that is something that we have to look into as well. So these are the issues that need to be worked out, although there is a lot of freedom that are going to be given to the institutions. They're also going to ask this question. This is only for 9 years. If we are going to have such a massive investment in terms of infrastructure, in terms of bringing the talent pool, and if there is no guarantee that it is going to be continued beyond those 10 years, then why should we dip our feet into it, so to speak? So these are the challenges that we have, and they need to be evened out, and then these need to be spelled out much more clearly by the Indian side as well as the overseas side. And whether it's going to be attractive or not, it's remained to be seen.
Okay, so a host of challenges there, Professor Kumar, that have been cited by Professor Mishra. And I think the most important one from a student's perspective is going to be, how would you ensure that the education here is going to be at par with the institution of the home country? So that, of course, is something, it will be an apprehension which is going to be asked by students also in the times to come. And the other regulatory challenges that Professor Mishra spoke about, how do we intend to devise mechanisms to overcome these challenges?
To address some of the concerns raised by my co-panelist, it is true that some American universities established their campuses elsewhere. But however, there are many universities which have already shown keen interest while discussing with UGC to establish their campuses in India. Mm-hmm. So especially from Europe, there are already many countries, a few countries which have discussed with us about this possibility. So we hope that there will be foreign universities which will come to India. And the other point that he has raised is whether we will be able to attract the best talent as faculty in these foreign campuses. You see, one great advantage that India has is that our Indian diaspora, they are top academicians across the globe. Even if some of them come for shorter durations for a semester or two and work here, that itself can be a great contribution to the higher education in India. In addition to our own Indians, I'm sure there are many multinational companies in India. There are many foreigners who work in India. In fact, many of them, they like India. They like Indian culture. I'm sure many foreign faculty also will be attracted to come to India and work here. And as far as the disciplines are concerned, in India, there are certain disciplines which are very popular. And many of the students who go abroad, they are not going into, certain areas such as, in fact, they mostly go into STEM areas, many of the students, in my experience. Mm-hmm. And in India, too, many of these areas in the emerging fields such as financial management, fintech, machine learning, data science, these are all extremely popular subjects. And when the foreign institutions establish their programs in India, they have to establish in in such disciplines where there is a great demand, in those disciplines where students are going abroad. And only then they can attract a large number of students. And one last point I would like to make here. India today is one of the largest educational system. We have from class 1 to PhD level close to about 300 million students. And out of that, 40 million students are in higher education. So even if you tap a small percentage of this 40 million, you will have hundreds of thousands of students who will be interested to study in the campuses established by the foreign educational institutions. So I would like to look at this in a more optimistic way and then try things, even though these things might have failed in elsewhere. There is no that these experiments will fail in India, especially because in India, education is given top priority. Every parent in India, every family in India, they would like their kids to be educated. And I think that this is one of the greatest opportunities, both for the foreign higher educational institutions and also for our students to have access to high quality higher education.
Absolutely. Professor Pant, the fact that for young students who dream of going abroad and doing courses that they would like to study from a foreign institute, the fact that it is available in your country itself is going to be, of course, a game changer, as we've discussed earlier on. But since we are also looking at the challenges, how big a challenge will finance be? Because when we look at the other parts of the world, similar models have seen local partners investing much more. Do we expect, or do we see that also happening in our country from private players, from the government itself, taking care of the aspect of finance? Because that is going to be most vital.
There are 4 ways. As an example I am giving, there are multiple ways in which foreign educational institutions can come to India. I will give 4 examples. One is this foreign institution can establish a company, register a company in India under Companies Act, and through this company, it can operate its campus in India, or it can come through Limited Liabilities Partnership Act, or it can also have a joint venture with an existing Indian entity. It could be another institution which already has the infrastructure and other resources, and they can have a joint venture, or the foreign institution can come as an standalone institution by setting up a branch office. And all these possibilities come under the FEMA 1999 Act, the Foreign Exchange Management Act. So there are many possibilities, there are many routes through which the foreign educational institutions can come to India.
Okay. Professor Pant, this is a reform long overdue. I was going through certain articles and which said that similar attempts were made by previous governments way back in 1995, then in 2010. How different is this move from the previous moves made by the Congress government, made by the UPA government in 2010? So in terms of the changes that we are talking about today, the modalities that we're talking about today, and taking a step towards globalization, how different or how forward-looking is this one?
See, you are right. That in the past also we have had discussions and some moves towards that end. But I think what was happening in the past was that there was a piecemeal approach to the problem. Mm-hmm. What we are seeing today, which is different, is that we have articulated a national education policy, which is a comprehensive approach to education in all its respects. And this reform is embedded within that larger system. And I think that makes a difference, because you really cannot have this reform or this idea that let's have foreign universities let's have them setting their campuses in India. In terms of a standalone policy measure, it has to be looked at through the prism of what is happening in the wider spectrum of higher education in the country, and also possibly in the context of what is happening in the education system in the country. So I think as we have reformed, or as we are making an attempt to reform education at multiple levels, from the very basic to higher, the fact that major universities are now being asked or now being told that they are very welcome to set up campuses here, changes that perspective. It changes the perspective of the foreign universities, because they look at India that is more serious about reforms in higher education and in education more general. And I think it also allows Indians and and Indian students who will be graduating through the various levels of education in India to visualize a symmetry in their education system, whereby when they pass out from class 12, they have a plethora of choices from which they can forge their own educational trajectory forward. So I think once you look at this reform as being embedded in the wider reforms of the education system, you increase the credibility and you increase the favorability of these reforms, and perhaps allow multiple stakeholders, various stakeholders, to converge much more categorically than you would otherwise do. Because if you take a piecemeal approach to one reform at a time, there'll always be big question marks. And I think some of the points that Amalindu has mentioned are particularly relevant in that context. But today, as we are looking for reforms across the board, I think it is incumbent to think holistically about what changes we can bring, because ultimately this is not simply a question of having university campuses in India. This is also a question of how much are we tapping into this huge appetite that Indians have for higher education. And can we tap into that more productively? And I think state cannot do it all. We have seen private enterprises emerging in India. Some of them are doing well. And so there is no reason to expect that the foreign universities will not do well. But the problems of regulation, the problems of standardization, those problems will remain. Some of them will be resolved as the process goes forward. But some of them we'll have to take a long term approach to some of these challenges and see where we can, how we can make do with the best possible alternatives that are available. But I think certainly the move towards these reforms tells us a wider story about not simply that foreign universities are welcome in India, but also that we have begun to think about education much more systematically. And I think which is the need of the hour, given the demographic dividend that we have, and given the need to create skill sets in India that are absent.
Professor Mishra, do you agree? Because you've spoken about hurdles, and Professor Kumar has certainly responded by saying that as we take this reformative measure, this was long overdue. There will be certain hurdles which we will tackle on our way. But in terms of opportunities, if we look at the opportunities far outweigh the challenges, perhaps in terms of the bright future that it provides to the hundreds of Indians who want to go abroad, but they cannot due to lack of resources, due to lack of money as well. The fact that those who cannot go out can get the best of education here in the country. And also, in a way, it's good for the country. We are able to retain the best of talent here itself. So that way, it helps us. So overall, if you look at, what would you think about the opportunities?
Well,
Professor Mishra,
the biggest opportunity
Kumar, I'll come back to you.
Is to gain
Professor Kumar, I'll come to you in just a minute. That question was for Professor Mishra.
Right. Okay.
Yes.
I think what I see here, thank you so much. What I see here is the privatization of education, which is a good step in itself. Why do I say that? First of all, the educational system in India, the higher education system in India in particular, is not that bright. If we sort of take out some institutions such as Indian Institute of Science, Indian Institute of Management, and some of the higher institutions, because we don't appear in the global league table. We have many educational institutions, but they are not performing. Even my own previous institution I was looking at has gone down even in the national league table, that is Jawaharlal Nehru University. So what I see here is that the foreign universities coming into India will be a breath of fresh air, because the space that is so crowded at the moment will be even in the long term. So we are going to weed out many of these institutions who are providing just education for the education's sake, but not providing the global world-class education that Indians are entitled to, or it's their right, and so on and so forth. So this is the positive thing that I see here. Second one, to go back to your question about families getting that education, indeed. But then also we need to look at how this is going to work out. For instance, if we are expecting that these global institutions provide global education, and they're going to make these students pay perhaps the global fees. So are the Indian students going to be in a situation to pay for that kind of education? Or is it only going to be for the elites? Now, let me talk about two institutions that I know, which are based somewhere very close to Delhi. One is Ashoka and one is the Jindal. And most of their student intakes are students from upper, higher income groups. Now, if we're having the foreign institutions, are they going to cater to those who cannot afford? Of course, there is a regulation in UGC which suggests that it has to provide some basic scholarships, fellowships, and so on and so forth. But that needs to be spelled out as well. But we shouldn't be sort of looking at a scenario where only the creme de la creme get that best education and the rest are kind of pushed out further and further.
That's in fact,
That is
Professor
my
Mishra,
fear.
that's a very valid concern. And let me take that back to Professor Kumar. Professor Kumar, the fact that you've given the foreign institutions who want to set up campuses here in India the freedom to decide on the fee structure, wouldn't there be any regulation? Because that's a valid concern that when we talk about the opportunity at our doorstep, we also have to ensure that they don't begin to charge so much that it goes out of the affordability range of the people, of the masses that we're talking about. The first question. The second is also about the eligibility aspect. What kind of foreign institutions will be allowed to set up campuses here in the country so as to ensure that when we talk about the quality of higher education, that is also sustained, the global ranking index of India, the kind of collaboration that we want to have and improve our ranking as well, that also it becomes a reality?
So let me answer your question in two parts. Indians by nature, they are very quality conscious, and also they look at the affordability. And ultimately, whether these campuses will be able to survive will depend on the quality of education that they offer, and also the kind of tuition fee structure they will decide. If it is too exorbitant, not affordable, and obviously they will not be able to attract the students. So therefore, they had to balance. They should have a balanced view on how they will structure their tuition fees. And we are also aware of the fact that there will be many students who may not be financially sound enough to be able to join in these campuses. Therefore, our regulation very clearly says that based on an evaluation process, as is done in any top global universities, full or partial need-based scholarships may be provided by these institutions from their own funds, such as the endowment funds, alumni donations, and so on. So this process also is embedded in these regulations. And ultimately, what will happen is the presence of these campuses in India will also promote collaboration, research collaborations between these campuses and other educational institutions. And this will also create a kind of healthy competition between the institutions. So overall, I would expect a positive impact of having these campuses in our country and training our students in emerging areas in some of the best campuses that will be established through these regulations. Remember, we want to become a 5 trillion economy. We are already the 5th largest economy, and we will be growing to become 3rd largest economy. And these students who will be educated here will become vehicles for the economic development of our country. So I would expect that this reformative regulation will have a significant impact on Indian higher education.
Absolutely. It's going to be a game changer and opens up opportunities for students who have been, who dream of going abroad, but because of resource crunch, as we've discussed, they're not able to go through. So this is going to open a window of opportunity for them. And also for the universities, it opens up a huge and emerging, vibrant market like India. So it's a win-win situation from both sides. We've discussed how the UGC has come up with these regulations. There are certain freedoms, but at the same time, there are also certain regulations which these foreign institutions will have to abide by. So the draft regulations have been released today. The feedback will be shared with the UGC, after which some of the best ones and the feasible ones will be incorporated, as the UGC chairman just pointed out. So we'll wait and see what kind of changes will be brought about to these regulations once the window of the feedback is closed down. But for that, for now, I'll have to wind up the program. Time is running out. Thank you once again to all three of you for joining us on the program and sharing your thoughts with us and our viewers. And to you viewers, thank you very much for your time. I'll see you same time tomorrow. Take care of yourselves. Keep watching Sansad TV.